There's all sorts of belts when it comes to martial arts, and there is a mix of mixed martial arts, like the MMA of UFC and Bellator and so many. Does Bellator even exist anymore? That being said, there are a plethora of different ones. We got Aikido, Karate, Judo, Jiu-Jitsu, so many. And which one is the best belt? And I wanted to watch a video that I found, and I wanted to see which is the best belt. And I want to see if this is the best reason why, or if it's the worst reason why. So let's hop into it, you guys. And like always, like, subscribe, and let's jump into it.
If you choose to have a black belt in any martial art, which one would you choose? Judo, Jiu-Jitsu, Taekwondo, Karate? While each of them focus on different subsets of fighting, they also have entirely different bases for their belt ranking system. So that's going to be what we look at today. We're going to look.
That is very true. Very, very true. I think Jiu-Jitsu is the longest. Definitely.
How many belts they have, the colors they have, the stripes that they have on each one, the skill and technique required to earn those belts, the history behind the belt system. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, some of these belt systems, they don't have the best reputation. So, we'll see if that's warranted. The only black belt that I have is in karate, so I figured that's the one we should start off with. I actually got it when I was 11 years old, and recently got my 4th degree. Despite that, I think there's somebody better that could help us out with this. Hello. What's up? You can't see me here. Where's my... There we go. What's up? Whenever I think of belts in martial arts, I think of the karate black belt. And I don't know where it comes from.
Right. And there are so many, there are so many myths surrounding the black belt. And it's funny because if you look at the name in Japanese for black belt, the shodan literally means first level. And a lot of people think it's the end, but it's actually just the beginning.
Yeah.
And also the colors are in different orders in different dojos. So it's totally different depending on where you go. There's no real standard, unfortunately.
Yeah, what are the most common colors you see, I guess, karate internationally?
White, yellow, green, blue,
red,
brown, black.
Or red. Brown.
These are the Q belts. Yeah.
We had white, yellow, orange, green, purple, red, brown, black.
Okay, same. We have the exact same, except we don't have the red one.
Comparing these martial arts is going to be difficult, like I mentioned, but I think I've got a decent system here. We're going to talk about how many belts there are in each system, the stripes that each of these belts have. 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. I think we had 7 stripes spread out throughout our 8 belts.
See, and this makes it very lucrative when starting out. And what I want to just kind of double down on is it makes it more lucrative with the kids. And when we have to see what the kids have to go through and the requirements that they have to go through, it's just a lot more. And once you get to the adult, then you have to like progress more and more. So to his point, you know, he got his black belt when he was a kid, and then he got his 4th degree. Different martial arts will require you to be 16 or 18. Usually it's 16 to promote up to like an adult level of belts. But I mean, when you start, 7 belts. I mean, and then the stripes. There's just so much, and that's why I do like jiu-jitsu. I'm not going to be biased on this at all. But just like for an example, you have white, blue, purple, brown, black. So you have 5 belts, 4 stripes each. I'm not a big stripe guy, but, I digress. Anyway, let's continue.
There are 14 rankings.
See?
The requirements for these belts, the time that it takes, the difficulty for each of these belts, and then I think an interesting one would be to look at the public image for each one. And while gathering all this information, I'd also like to get to the bottom of some things. Tell me this, is this myth or martial art? The belt crossing behind your back means that you should be weary of people when you're not around.
It is the traditional way, actually, of tying the belt with the cross behind the back. But it's more for supporting your lower back, especially when you train for many hours. You want that back support to be able to keep training.
Myth or martial art? The belt ranking system in karate was white belt, it's a clean belt. Then it turns into red because you bled on it. And then it turns black once the blood is crusted over. Is that true or false? Is it true or false?
No.
Which one is it?
No, but-
Is it myth or martial art?
There are many of these stories, like the belt turns purple because you're beaten black and blue, or it goes another color because, it's yellow because you peed on it. I don't know why, but there are many different stories about the different belt colors. But in reality, many of the old styles don't have all these colors. They were added later. It's part of a larger system that karate adapted from judo, called the Dan-Kyu system. And then, when karate was modernized in mainland Japan, they had to adopt this because it was part of the criteria set forth by the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai, which is the Japanese Martial Arts Federation. Because karate wasn't originally a Japanese martial art like judo or kendo was, for instance. It was an Okinawan one, but it wasn't even named karate. That was another criteria in order to modernize it in mainland Japan. They had to change the name, they had to adopt the karate uniform, they had to start using the belts, and all of these changes led to what we today refer to as karate. But if you look at old photos of old pioneers or masters, they never wear the belts. They don't even wear the karate uniform. Usually they actually practice in their underwear. The question is, where did Jigoro Kano, the founder of judo, come up with this ranking system or belt system?
Oh my gosh.
So,
Okay.
meaning the rabbit hole goes deep. And you gotta keep searching, my friend.
I was gonna say, this is on me now, too. Dang it. Dang. Okay, well, I've got a lot of work ahead of me then.
Yes, he does, because it does go back very, very far, even into the Chinese realm. You have to think about this, too. So a lot of these martial arts, because as a person of the USA, which I love so much and dear because of our freedoms, but a lot of these communist countries that were, run and ruled didn't have access to firearms. And so once, like, the Qing dynasty came through and, gunpowder started getting, involved in battles, well, when it came to hand-to-hand combat, if we didn't have our guns, what else do we have left? Our fists, our feet, our knees. But also more so, a lot of these martial arts are to help them defend from the government, surprisingly, because that's all they did have. So if they can't practice with their weapons like we do, which is interesting because, like, if you look at the West, once we came over here and colonized, with Great Britain and, Christopher Columbus, we had boxing. Boxing was our true tale. 1, 2, 1, 2, right? Not a lot of feet work, but with, you have the Japanese culture, especially with Osaka and Okinawa, coming in with judo and eventually bringing in jiu-jitsu and, bringing it over to Brazil. There's a lot of lineage that goes on. So it is important to have lineage, but not only that, but where the art came and why it came about. And I think that's also important. But the belt system, we will continue.
Journey never ends.
I'll take it from here. And to give you some quick context on the belts, because everybody else is going to as well, white belt and yellow belt, you're a beginner. Orange belt and green belt, you're probably starting to get decent at the techniques. By the time you get to purple belt, I trust you enough to spar and use these basics on other people. Brown belt, in my opinion, you are rounding out everything you've learned to prepare for black belt. All throughout this time, you're practicing katas, and by the time you get to black belt, then you can start learning what those katas mean. And not everybody does it that way. This right here is, this is my black belt. This is a 4th degree black belt in karate. Since I was 3 years old, I bled for this, I cried for this, and I sweat a bunch for this. I still sweat a bunch to this day. And more times a week than I wear this belt, I drink Element. Which is a sponsor of today's video.
Oh, God,
dang,
you're
got
killing
him.
me. You guys, he's killing me. Well, as we skip that, because I thought that was kind of funny, because we're going to get to some other martial arts, which I do respect. When he's talking about katas, and I actually did a video about is jiu-jitsu worth it? And yeah, it is. And I think even Aikido is and karate is, because you have those katas. Those are important. Being able to know how to stand and balance. And that's the thing. Like, I want to emphasize going back to, myself doing taekwondo, karate, Aikido, jiu-jitsu, wrestling. all of these play a factor in our roles of not only personal growth, but also self-awareness and people around us. My self-control of situations when I'm in, could be a party, a crowd, I'm very aware of things and body positions. And it's funny because when I have someone come up to me and like mess and wrestle around with me, it's really goes into fight or flight mode, and how fast I can pick up on that and just go right into it. So that's why it's so important to train and train constantly, because the more you know, the more you flow.
Do jiu-jitsu these days. Kind of like I did in 2016. The only difference between then and now, I have 3 stripes on my white belt. Yes, I am an 8-year white belt, technically. My experience with jiu-jitsu is, in our karate curriculum, we kind of did the bare minimum for what you would need in jiu-jitsu. So by the time I started officially taking classes, I was familiar. I wasn't good, but I was familiar. And I already had my black belt in karate, so I didn't really pursue any ranking. I just kind of went.
This is a bad situation.
It's been on and off since 2016. I've definitely gotten more acclimated, but I know near nothing about the belt system other than what it feels like to roll with specific belt colors. Weirdly enough, mostly black belts. I don't know how that happens, but that's, So once again, though, I'm gonna need somebody's help with the explanation of these belts. How long have you been taking jiu-jitsu?
So I started jiu-jitsu pretty early on.
Frank D's.
After UFC 1, I read about it. This was like 1993.
UFC 1, dang.
Yeah, spent the next couple of years anywhere I could find a Hoist seminar or Hickson seminar, or any videotapes or anything I could get my hands on. It was real different back there. There was like there were no instructors. Everybody was still in Brazil. And so then I joined the Marine Corps after that. And so from like 97 to 2002, I didn't train. And then our unit was activated for the Iraq War, so.
Yeah, long story short, Frank's a badass. Perfect guy to explain these belts to us.
Yep, so the adult ranks are white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, and then black. So each belt, 1 stripe, 2 stripe, 3 stripe, 4 stripe, then you're eligible for the next belt.
Which means, as far as rankings go, there are white belt, 1, 2, 3, 4. Blue belt, 1, 2, 3, 4. 20. No, it's 21. Trust me, I did the math. 5 rankings for each belt, plus the black belt.
So yeah, so from white belt to blue belt, it's really like an accumulation of basic knowledge.
Right.
What are the positions?
Yeah.
What are the submissions?
And why aren't blue belts allowed to do jiu-jitsu anymore?
Why aren't they allowed to
Do jiu-jitsu anymore?
blue belts?
I just heard that they don't. I haven't got my blue belt for that
Right.
reason.
Oh,
Because they're not allowed
yeah.
to come to
Yeah, they
jiu-jitsu.
can't. Once they get to blue belt, they quit.
Right.
It's not that they can't come; they won't come.
Oh, they just don't come. What's like the average time you see for somebody going from white to blue?
White to blue, probably
1 to 2 years.
1.5 to 3 years, maybe.
Blue belt to purple belt.
Again, I would say 2 to 3 years. Blue belts quit because life happens.
Yeah.
Purple belts quit because their heart gets broken on the mat. You've accumulated all this knowledge, and then at purple belt, there comes a point where you're not learning new stuff anymore. So you've got to really kind of buckle down, and now you're refining and trying to figure out how do I now apply all of this stuff that I've learned.
Interesting. Like the feeling, the correlation is for jiu-jitsu blue belts compared to a taekwondo black belt, a karate black belt.
And Bro is preaching right now. And what he's getting to is that when you reach a specific point in your journey, and this happened to me, right? So like for me, my white to blue belt, just basic positions, but the blue to purple, you really start refining, to his point, about what the moves are. And for someone to get it and continue, because a lot of people take time off. And the reason why people do take time off, to his point, we call them the blue belt blues, is where you get their blue belt and they head out because they have accomplished something and then they're finished and they think that's it. But in retrospect, the problem is that they actually digress, obviously, because they're not training, but also there's a false reality to them that they know stuff because what they've learned are the basics, right? Which I've told you before that 75 to 80% of people don't even know. But the problem with that, is having this confidence of not really knowing style, because style is like the swag of how we do it, because everybody has a different style, right? How we walk, how we talk, how we eat, how we drink. Everyone's got their own little niche of how they do things. And so you can have the standard, but once you start breaking out of the standard, I know I'm going like really philosophical here. Once you go off that branch and you start incorporating your own, it could be like, hey, I'm going to be a spider guard expert or a delahiva, or I'm going to be, I'm going to be a leg locker. There's so many different things that you can do and specialize in, or just have this whole plethora, or potpourri as I call it, which I love to death. And I think that's where I think most people succeed in this sport, because to him, he was saying that, each belt takes about a year to 3 years, but you can actually mitigate that by being consistent and also allowing yourself to just be accepted of things, and not having like, this is the way it's got to be and this is the structure. And that's why I hate people that idolize instructors so much and like put them as gods. And it's like, no, this is who this person is. And do I need to do this exact route? No, I'm going to go on my own path. Now he's going to show me his map, I'm going to use that and follow that, but I might take a side quest a little bit and learn a little bit more about that. And that's okay. And I think it's very important that we do so.
The way Matt was just talking, he was like, it feels like there's like a weight on me now.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how I felt when I got my first black belt. So I was like,
You just got your blue belt.
last week. What it feels like, what I've been telling people is it feels heavier. So I was in the military for a little while, and when you started to get this cool guy piece of flair on your left shoulder, you acted like it was super heavy. When I was a white belt, nobody expected me to know anything, didn't expect me to be any good. I could roll with anybody, and if I got beat, well, he's a white belt.
Yeah.
If I beat someone, I was like, wow, he's good as a white belt.
yeah.
Next rank up, now whether it's self-imposed or not, there's pressure behind it.
For sure.
I walk in the gym now with a blue belt, and people think, well, he at least has some idea what he's doing.
Yeah.
And the difference between me on Wednesday of last week and Monday of today is pretty negligible.
Yeah,
That's
right.
true.
Yeah.
That's
And
very
what's
true.
interesting is the first comparison that we really have is the purple belt in jiu-jitsu and a black belt in karate. I think the reason this comparison happens is, one, the time frame is about the same. But two, the vast number of techniques possible in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Let's look at karate, for example. Everything happens on this plane. There's grappling, there's techniques, there's throws, but almost everything happens from two people starting with their feet on the ground, their head in the sky. And there's a lot of moves in karate. Now imagine if you could invert these characters in any physical possible combination. The moves are essentially endless. So in order to compute all of that information, it has to take longer.
It's true.
It's gonna feel like a lot bigger of a deal.
It's
I
true.
don't even know how to do the math on it. I hope somebody else will
He
someday.
put an infinity symbol on
I
there.
don't have the brain power for that. So for requirements, we're just gonna put infinite, because I don't know. The time that it takes, according to my poll, on average,
10 to 12.
9 to 10 plus years. Some people on that poll, by the way, put 3 years. I saw you, okay? Now I know you're a liar. The difficulty to get to your black belt, it's gonna be high. The image though, the public perception the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt has, high again. Super big.
That's cool.
Big public perception for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And as far as where the belts come from in Jiu-Jitsu, well, we're left with a familiar
Do
story.
you know if there was any direct influence from any martial arts that?
The only one that I could think of, and I don't know exactly, would have been judo, because
Yeah.
that's what they learned originally.
Right.
Was judo.
Oh, was it?
Yep.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So it was.
I thought it was a Japanese jiu-jitsu influence.
Depending on who you ask, they
Yeah.
either learned Kodokan Judo. 'Cause
Yeah.
Maeda,
Yep.
he was a student of Goro Kano, who founded
Yes.
judo.
Yep.
Correct.
So technically, that's what they learned. They took the ground fighting from judo,
Yep.
Correct.
the Niwaza,
Yep.
and modified that and focused on the ground aspect versus the takedown aspect.
Interesting.
Which means naturally our next belt system is going to be Taekwondo. My experience with Taekwondo, have you ever binge watched a series in like 3 days and then you explained that series to a friend? I did like the Taekwondo version of that. I learned most of the forms, I learned the kicks, the curriculum. I even lived in the back of a dojo and was granted a black belt. I think it was I think I was on like a temporary black belt visa. I'm pretty sure it's expired. I don't really know how it works. And I skipped all the other belts. So like, I don't really know how they work.
So we all start off at a white belt. I think that's pretty universal around all martial arts.
That's what I've heard.
Then we go up white with yellow stripe to yellow.
Okay.
And then we use the stripes in between, but then we're gonna go to green. After green, we go to blue blue to red, and red is your progression to black belt. So you have the black stripe, you have the Bodon belt, which is half and half, kind of symbolize you're getting closer to that black belt rank.
Interesting.
And then of course, you finish with the black belt. What I'm wanting for all of our lower belt students, white to yellow belt, is good respect, good discipline, good focus, listening to their parents, good at school. That's what's gonna be most important. It's gonna make them more effective human beings, right?
Right.
So once they get those 5 stripes, they're gonna know that they are ready for testing. But every belt's gonna have a punch, a kick, and a form. And then on top of that, we have sparring and board breaking requirements as we get to a higher level.
Also, to keep the lineage up, while karate and BJJ's belts most likely derived from judo, Taekwondo's belts most likely derived from karate.
So the cookie one, the governing body for Taekwondo, I don't have an exact date, but I imagine it's gonna be around the 80s.
Okay.
And that's kind of like when we're kind of unifying the martial art. Regulating on stances, regulating on the blocks, how does it start, how does it finish, so that we had one general curriculum to go off of. And then we do have a not mythological, what's the word I'm looking for? More traditional way of looking at the belt colors, as white being the blank slate. Yellow symbolizing the sun's energy coming down to start to give you more growth. Goes into green belt, plants growing from the earth, getting your roots in, getting a solid foundation. Blue symbolizing the sky, you're starting to reach towards the sky, towards new opportunities, if you will. Red symbolizing the passion and fire, warning of danger because you're finally getting proficient enough that you are a threat, potentially a threat to others, maybe yourself. And then the black belt symbolizing that new beginning. But in the end,
I gotta say that was actually really funny. And I also gotta say, it's pretty legit. You know, a lot of people, first of all, Master Chang's. I don't know if he looks like Master Chang's. I thought we were going to be at a Chinese restaurant. I digress. Okay, so what I'm going to get at here is Taekwondo is actually a legitimate martial art. I was trained one before. I say myself as a black belt. I trained as a kid until I was 15. And it was a good time. And again, all these martial arts, as I said in the beginning, gives us a nice round shape to our skill set. One thing I do like about Taekwondo is the fact that we're obviously going to do a lot more kicking. We obviously have more, Muay Thai. And Muay Thai doesn't have a belt system per se, but with Taekwondo, which is a regulated Olympic sport, so that's got to say something too as well. Again, is a great. So remember too, each different martial art has a different specific motive. So like Taekwondo, for an example, is going to be more of a defensive martial art. Okay, it's. I hate to say it, but when you're in a Taekwondo stand, instead of like facing straight forward, you're going to get more of a side, right? And that way you can kick off your opponent. And that's Ryan Hall actually does this a lot. Ryan Hall is a great user of this. And it's almost a southpaw stance that keeps your opponent away, right? Whereas karate and aikido is going to be more of an attacking martial art, like jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is more of a defense to submission. Judo is more of an attacking sport, right? So we have to put all these in perspectives. And to his point, though, there are a lot of stripes, but they are more progressive in their belts. So, like, for instance, jiu-jitsu, you're going to be probably 2 years for your promotion, where aikido and maybe taekwondo, it's going to be maybe every 6 months or a year.
Are similar in that they are progress checks. Where are they in their training personally, and what they have to focus on next?
The requirements here are nowhere near as vast as the requirements for jiu-jitsu or even karate. It just doesn't include as many variables or options or techniques. Really focusing on a lot of things. You're focusing on a few things for a lot of time, and that's why I'm putting requirements as little.
That's
Taekwondo
correct.
is a specialty sport.
That is
I think
correct.
I saw the average was about 4 years.
That
This
is correct.
average makes a lot more sense because 1, there's not a lot of rankings to go through, and 2, there's not a lot of requirements that you have. I think the difficulty to get a Taekwondo black belt, I'm gonna give this a medium, just like I'm giving karate. I don't think it's easy to get a Taekwondo black belt. I think it just carries a little less emphasis, especially in the public image, because you see that 4 years. You see a lot of kids with these, and frankly, I have an entire opinion on that.
So now I have to ask the question, do you give kids black belts?
No. Kids have to earn them. We do have kids that are black belts. I feel that if they have put in the work to memorize everything, if they've put in the work, get the proficiency in all the strikes and all the kicks and the understandings, and most importantly, how to become a great human being overall,
Better person, yeah.
then they definitely earn that belt.
I agree. I think kids that take these classes are like 10 times more passionate than any adult is. For the most part, they're in like forming years where they're learning at a higher rate than we are.
I just want to stop really quick right there. This is a total separate note on the belt system, but with the kids, I don't agree with giving kids black belts. And I say this as like, do kids deserve, a high rank really quick? Yes and no. It just depends. And it's just hard because when the earlier you give it to a kid, I don't know. Maybe I'm biased. Like, I really don't have a decision on this, but like, to their point where you have a black belt, it's just the beginning, right? I totally agree with that. You're on the next step in your next journey. For a kid, I don't know. Once you achieve it, what's the next step? I don't know. So I have to think about that.
Of not giving a kid a black belt because they're a child is so odd to me. Like, I got my black belt when I was 11. I had been training since I was like 4, probably. It took me 7 years. If an adult took 7 years on the same curriculum, they'd be like, "Where's my black belt?"
And it's, classes aren't easy. They have days
those
where
are
they're not feeling well, they're
expectations.
tired, they're sore,
Like, those
whatever
are
it is.
expectations.
Long day at school,
Yeah.
but they're still coming in and they're training and they're staying consistent over a long period
And
of
I
time.
agree with that too.
I would challenge most adults to think, when's the last time they stuck to something for 4 years? Their CrossFit routine,
He's got a
New Year's
point.
resolution.
He's got a point.
So I think it shows a lot of discipline. It shows a lot of discipline for kids of young ages to be able to accomplish that. I think another popular misconception about black belts is once you're a black belt, you should be able to beat up everybody.
Yeah, true. It almost seems like what people assume is that you give them a black belt and you say, "Here you go, like, this is you are now perfect."
Another thing I think is a misconception is that black belt is the end, right? Oh, I'm going to get my black belt. We are still learning new kicks, new punches, new forms, each and every belt. So when we get to our first degree black belt, it's not like, oh, I've done it, I've learned it all, I'm the master.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. Okay, now I have a good understanding of all of our basic techniques. So it gives you that base foundation, if you will, to start growing off of into those higher degrees of black belt.
Which is very interesting because at this point, we've narrowed down that judo was the first belt system martial art. And the way our next coach, Alex Lemon, talks about belts really fits with David Wright's approach. Yeah, so what color belts are there in judo?
So currently we have white, yellow, orange, green, brown, and black.
Okay.
And I mean, there's a few more like higher black ones, there's black and red, red and white, and then red.
Yeah.
But those are more ceremonial. And the Q ranks are kind of like, I think of them as negative ranks because they start at 6 and they go down to 1. And the 1 is the highest one.
Interesting.
And then you go to your first degree black,
Then
and
you get
that's like considered your first step. So like I think of the Q ranks as like you're catching up to 0, then you're actually starting.
That's kind of fun. I like that aspect.
Yeah. My experience with judo, well, I've done a collab with one of the most well-known and well-respected judoka in the U.S., Shintaro Higashi. He's tossed me.
Dude,
I've
he's
been
a cool guy.
ragdolled by him. And then also, very recently, I did a video where I took one class and I entered a tournament. I didn't do the best. To me, this is the most deceptively difficult martial art. And it could be because when I'd done Taekwondo in the past, I had a kicking background. But you know what? We did a lot of takedowns in karate as well. And I'd also been doing sumo. I didn't have any sort of leg up in judo that I know of, at least. But judo's history goes well beyond any experience that I have,
I like that
obviously.
single leg.
And it's time to finally get to the bottom of where do these belt rankings come from?
Jigoro Kano, founded judo 1882.
Yeah.
Back then it was still just another type of jujutsu. Like every other unarmed combat system, all
Okay.
kind of fell under that category in
Doujin.
Japan.
Okay.
So back then they
Unarmed.
didn't have a gi. They wore like the traditional kimono, hakama, and they had like that sash belt thing.
Okay. A belt, but almost literally like
Right,
how the
yeah.
average person uses a belt.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then Kano came up with the gi because it's more practical to train with.
Yeah.
And it more closely resembles modern clothing. And then people just wore a white belt with the gi. And it was not true white, you know, because they didn't have bleach back then.
Okay.
So it was more like a beige. If you look at Kando's original gi in the Kodokan Museum in Japan,
Yeah.
it is. It's like a real sweaty beige look.
Oh, nice. A dirty.
But yeah. But that's how they all were, and we actually saw those in judo pretty frequently until recently. How it happened is everybody was wearing white belts, and then Kana needed a way to distinguish his Qs from his dans. They had separate Q ranks, but they still wore the white belt.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't until the 20s, I think, when people started implementing colors in, and it was in the West. And in the 30s, one of Kando's students was teaching in France. He's the one that kind of officially suggested that the colors change. Because all the instructors that were teaching in the West noticed that Westerners, we are extrinsically motivated.
Yeah, for sure.
Green.
And that's actually really true, you guys. I want to give one example. What he's talking about here, where military. And I think the military is where I believe a lot of this came from, because we have rankings in military, right? We have a private, a sergeant, a captain. And that ranking gives us like kind of where we're at on the totem pole, and not necessarily about as a human being, but more about like kind of like where your authority lies within the jiu-jitsu realm, because that gives us a little bit of like accountability. And when I say accountability, it's more about what your duties are, what your expectations are. I think expectations are a big thing, because as we're getting into our development in martial arts, we have a duty to take care of our predecessors and the people that are coming, and that's a very important role for us to have. And I think that's actually a good thing, you know. And yeah, I think it's a really good thing. Let's finish it up.
You know, he goes, I was a Harai Goshi guy. I throw everybody, and when your Harai Goshi is gone, this is what you got.
Most of the time, all of this is to get you to a point that you can start doing the martial art correctly. This is all kind of just learning. And then in my opinion, once you get the black belt, it's once you start applying, innovating. And while all of these martial arts are different, that's one thing that the belt system has in common almost everywhere.
I think one last note is that I want to encourage all people to train in martial arts, because there's no way that it's not going to make you a better person overall. So I always tell our students, especially when they're testing for that black belt, that, you know, my black belt isn't the same as Sensei Seth's black belt. My black belt isn't the same as any of the other students' black belts, because I know how much work and sacrifice I put in to achieve this belt and this rank. So that allows me to take a certain amount of pride out of my accomplishment. So when you work your butt off to achieve your specific rank or black belt, then the amount of pride you take out of it is the amount of work that you put into it, just like anything else in your life. So if you want it to have more value, then you put more work, more time, more dedication into your art, and then nobody can take that away from you.
He's right. He's absolutely right. And this is why I'm always about achieving and going to the absolute limit to achieve the things that you want to do. Is there the best belt? No. It's just applying yourself, you guys, and staying consistent. So anything that you are doing, there's really no way that I can say whatever martial art you're doing is good or bad. It's good, in all honesty. And what I love what that guy said. Do you know anybody who like does CrossFit for 4 or 5, 10 years? Yeah, it's very rare, right? But these kids are doing it all the time. And I had to rethink that a little bit about the whole black belt situation. But, you know, and I can always learn, and I can be an open book. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. Love you. Talk to you later.